10-Minute Murder contains depictions of actual crimes. What you are about to hear is real and violent in nature. Discretion is advised. This is 10-Minute Murder.
Welcome to 10-Minute Murder, the brief and bingeable true crime podcast. My name is Joe. I'm the host. Bonjour, and thank you for being here. I bet you didn't know I could speak French. And I can. The only word I know is bonjour, but it still counts. If you're new to the podcast, thank you for checking it out today. Croissant. That's another one I know in French. So we're up to 2 words now. Anyway, like I was saying before my ADD kicked in, if you're new here, I hope you enjoyed the episode today and consider subscribing or following or whatever your app says to do. When you subscribe, you automatically get new episodes. You don't have to go searching a couple of times a week for new ones. And while I'm talking about connecting with 10-Minute Murder, you can also find the show on social media. Links are in the show notes of this episode, or you can just type it into the search and it'll pop right up. On Facebook and Instagram, I post visuals that go along with the stories you hear about. Nothing gross and graphic, but enough that you'll be able to put a face to the names you're hearing about, or if there's a location involved. I usually put the location there as well. Today's story is about a real estate agent / serial killer. Between 2003 and 2013, he murdered 7 people. He was outgoing and friendly, mostly, but somehow managed to lead most conversations, professional or casual, into something sexual or about firearms. He was even known to openly watch porn videos while at work. This is the story of Todd Kohlhepp. Todd Kohlhepp was born in 1971 in Florida, but was raised in South Carolina and later Georgia. When Todd was still a toddler, no pun intended there, his parents got divorced. His mother got custody and married another man later that next year. Psychological reports found that Todd Kohlhepp had an unhealthy relationship with his stepfather and often wanted to live with his biological father, whom he had not seen in years. I couldn't find an explanation or definition of what investigators deemed unhealthy with his relationship with the stepfather. It could be something minor, like they didn't really get along and argued all the time, or it could be something possibly criminal, but that's speculation on my part. What we do know is that Todd was not a well-behaved kid. He was aggressive toward other kids and broke their toys or anything else they brought to school from home. By the age of 9, when he started counseling, Kohlhepp was described as being explosive and preoccupied with sexual content. He also displayed cruelty to animals, shooting a dog with a BB gun and killing a goldfish by dumping bleach into its tank. And you've listened to enough of these 10-Minute Murder episodes by now to know that being cruel to animals and abusive to other kids, especially when your home life is not ideal, it's often a recipe for a psychopathic person. And that often, at some point in their lives, leads to them harming other people. Obviously not always, and not all harm being murder, but definitely those things are true for Todd Kohlhepp. He spent a few months in a Georgia psychiatric hospital because he was completely unable to get along with anyone, especially other children. Eventually, in 1983, Todd was sent to live with his biological father in Arizona after his mother and stepfather separated. Todd Kohlhepp's father later said that the only emotion his son was capable of was anger. Todd began working a number of local jobs. It was also during this time that he kicked off his hobby and fascination with weapons. His father showed him how to make bombs and blow things up. Even though it seemed like they were getting along great, Todd's father spent quite a bit of time out with numerous girlfriends, so their bond weakened and their relationship deteriorated. He talked about going back to stay with his mother, but she encouraged him to stay with his father. He wanted to be with his dad, but it seemed more and more like his dad was interested in the company of other ladies instead of him. He felt unwanted by both of his parents. Just 3 years after moving to Arizona with his father, he got into his first real trouble. In November 1986, 15-year-old Todd kidnapped a 14-year-old girl in Tempe. He had a .22 caliber revolver and used that to threaten her, forcing her back to his home. He tied her up, taped her mouth shut so that no one could hear her scream, and he raped the girl. After, he threatened his younger siblings at the house if they told anyone of what they saw. Todd got caught anyway. He was arrested. He agreed to plead guilty to kidnapping, with the other charges of sexual assault and committing a dangerous crime against children dropped. He was registered as a sex offender and sentenced to 15 years in prison. When tested, Todd had an IQ of 118, which is considered above average, but was also diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And by the way, I don't like the name of that diagnosis, because if you don't know what it is, it really seems like not that big of a deal. Like you almost have a problem, but not really. Borderline personality disorder is characterized by a long-term pattern of unstable relationships, distorted sense of self, and strong emotional reactions. They often self-harm and struggle with feelings of emptiness, fear of abandonment, and detachment from reality. The judge in the kidnapping case said that he honestly didn't think that Todd was likely to be rehabilitated, calling him very bright, but behaviorally and emotionally dangerous. The probation officer felt pretty much the same about Todd, saying that he felt that he had the attitude of the world owed him something. His defense attorney, of course, said he didn't believe Todd would go on to harm anyone else in the future. During his time for the kidnapping, Todd was cited for numerous violations that included violent behavior. After serving 14 years, Todd Kohlhepp was released and moved to South Carolina, where his mother was living. During those 14 years, he got a degree in computer science from Central Arizona College. When he got out, he put that degree to use by working as a graphic designer in Spartanburg. At the same time, he continued his education, working toward a degree in business administration marketing. He graduated with that degree in 2008. Being a registered sex offender forbids you from doing many things when you're living your life outside of the prison walls, and despite that limitation, Todd was able to get a real estate license. How did he do that? I'm sure you're wondering. Well, he lied on the application. Nobody checked. He started his own firm and had dozens of agents working for him. He was recognized as a top-selling agent in the Carolina region. A customer of Todd's remembered him as being very outgoing, but noted that he would often talk about his firearms and sometimes subtly used sexual innuendo during the conversations. An assistant at Kohlhepp's firm described him as angry and condescending. A banker who worked with Kohlhepp said he often watched pornographic videos even at work. One of Todd's favorite places to eat was the Waffle House. It takes quite a bit to get noticed and labeled as disturbing at a Waffle House, but Todd did, to the point that the only person willing to go and take his order was the cook, who was a male. The refusal of the waitresses to deal with him was justified because one of them would later become a victim. Speaking of victims, the first 4 stemmed from Todd being embarrassed at a motorcycle shop. On November 6, 2003, a customer found 4 people shot to death inside Superbike Motorsports in Chesney. They were the owner and 3 employees. Apparently, Todd bought a motorcycle from the place a few days prior. One problem: Todd did not know how to ride a motorcycle, so he tried to return it. The employees laughed about him buying a bike that he couldn't ride and refused to refund what he paid. Todd Kohlhepp killed everyone in the place. 12 years later, August 2013, Kayla Brown and her boyfriend, Charles Carver, went missing after they went to clean Todd's home. Carver's body later turned up with multiple gunshots on Kohlhepp's property. Todd used Carver's phone to make several weird Facebook posts, pretending to be Carver. People noticed, and they alerted the police. A few months after she disappeared, Kayla was found, alive, chained to the inside wall of a metal storage container that sat on the property of Todd Kohlhepp. As police approached, they heard banging from the inside. She told them that she saw Todd kill her boyfriend because he was mad at her. Todd's mother later claimed that he killed Carver because Carver had a really smart mouth. Like that's a normal justification. Kayla Brown never really made much of an effort to escape because she was afraid of getting caught by Todd. He had showed her the graves of 2 other victims. Those bodies were discovered following Todd Kohlhepp's arrest and were identified as husband and wife, Johnny Coxey and Megan McCraw Coxey. She was the waitress that I mentioned earlier. They were hired to work on Kohlhepp's property. It was determined that they were killed and buried the year prior to Kayla being found captive in the metal storage container. When Kohlhepp was arrested, he confessed. He boasted about it. He said, "My golf game is weak. My kill game is strong." Police discovered during the course of their investigation that Todd had left online reviews for different products. One padlock review said, "Solid locks. have 5 on a shipping container. Won't stop them, but sure will slow them down until they're too old to care. Another for a shovel said, keep in car from when you have to hide bodies and you leave the full-size shovel at home. Does not come with a midget. Would have been nice. On May 26, 2017, Todd Kohlhepp pleaded guilty to 7 counts of murder, 2 counts of kidnapping, and 1 count of criminal sexual assault, and was sentenced to 7 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. In prison, speaking to his mother, Todd said that there are more victims than people know about. She asked, how many more? He said, you don't have enough fingers. That's today's 10-Minute Murder, the brief and bingeable true crime podcast. Thank you for listening today. And if you have a story you'd like for me to possibly cover, you can email it to 10minutemurder@gmail.com. You can easily connect with this podcast on social media. Just click the link in the show notes of this episode, or even easier, just type 10-Minute Murder into Facebook or Instagram. Speaking of, I'll leave a link to a news story about this case on the 10-Minute Murder Facebook page. It shows a part of what you're hearing about here today, plus body camera footage from when Caleb Brown was rescued from the storage container. Before you go, subscribe to this podcast wherever you are listening right now, and you'll never miss another episode. If you have friends that are into brief true crime stories like this one, tell them about 10-Minute Murder. Thanks for listening. Arrivederci. Wait, that's not French. That may be Italian. Anyway, have a good night.